All right, so this first video that I wanted to talk about today was sent to me on Instagram by one of you guys, and it was from the TikTok account Hannah Talks Bodies. Now, in this video, she kind of talks about, you know, weight loss and how it's impossible to lose weight. That's kind of the talking point. That's the whole thing that she's talking about. She's obviously like she's very Haze positive, right? Health at every size. And so I just kind of wanted to go over this video and share my thoughts. And I've done a little bit of research, not the most, I'm not the best researcher in the world, but I've done a little bit of research on the points that she makes. So let's go ahead and watch the video.
There is not a single research study in existence that shows that lifelong weight loss is possible for even more than a tiny fraction of people. Let's get into it. The largest and longest diet study in history had more than 20,000 participants and lasted 8 years.
Okay, so if we pause this and you look right here, it says, consider the Women's Health Initiative, okay? So this is the study that she is talking about. Now, I actually reached out to one of my very close friends who happens to be an obesity specialist. His whole job, he's a doctor, his name's Dr. Nadolski, and what he does is help people that are in obese bodies that want to lose weight, okay? And so I actually went and I looked up this study that was mentioned. And so, let's see, where's it at? Okay, so this is the study right here. This is from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. So this isn't the actual study, but this is kind of going over what the study did and what it was about, okay? So what is the goal of the WHI? The Women's Health Initiative, sponsored by the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute, is a long-term national health study that focuses on strategies for preventing heart disease, breast and colorectal cancer, I don't know how to say that word, and osteoporosis in postmenopausal women. These chronic diseases are the major causes of death, disability, and frailty in older women of all races and socioeconomic backgrounds. The original WHI study had 3 parts: a clinical trial, an observational study, and a community prevention study, and completed data collection in 2005. The WHI continues to contribute to the science of women's health through extension and ancillary studies. WHI extension studies collect long-term data for the WHI participants to complement the original WHI study. The current extension study is collecting annual health information from consenting WHI participants through 2020, focusing on cardiovascular events and aging. Okay? So this is the study that she mentions. Now, when I was talking to my friend, Dr. Nadolski, Spencer, very smart guy, he said that it's frustrating for him because people will cherry pick these studies. And as you guys saw, when I read what the study was about, it wasn't at all talking about weight loss. It wasn't at all talking about any of that stuff, right? And so that's why it's so frustrating, because people will pick the fact that maybe these people in this study, weight loss wasn't happening for them. But again, like, it's so weird because these people weren't even trying, like, weight loss wasn't the point of the study. So, like, why are we talking about weight loss wasn't happening when these people weren't even necessarily trying to lose weight? That's kind of like, I don't know, it feels a little disingenuous to me. But let's keep watching the video.
The study found that participants lost weight in the short term, which is typical of diet studies. But after 8 years, when the study concluded, they found out that the weight of the participants had changed virtually not at all from the starting point, despite having dieted that entire time, and their waist circumference had increased.
Okay, so it's 8 years goes by, all right? So a lot of people just naturally gain weight over the years, right? So that's a normal thing, especially if we're talking about this study where it's talking about postmenopausal women that are already a little bit older, and it's a pretty normal thing, you know, granted maybe not the best thing in the world, but it's a pretty normal thing for people to kind of gain a little bit of weight over time, especially as you're older, and especially over 8 years, right? Like, if a lot of people probably aren't the same weight when they're 52 versus when they're 60, right? Or when they're 60 versus when they're 68. Like, you just change over time. And so I think that that is a little bit disingenuous. And then on top of this, and my biggest critique about most of these videos, and when people talk about this, when you guys hear, I'm sure you guys have all heard the 95% of diets fail. Like, that's something that everyone says. Now, the problem with that, the problem that I have with that is that maybe a lot of diets have failed over the years, absolutely, but I personally believe it's not because it is impossible to lose weight and it is impossible to keep weight off. I don't believe that that's what the case is. I think it's more the diets that people are trying to go on and the things that people are trying to do to lose the weight is not effective, right? So if you're going out there and doing a bunch of crash diets that'll have you lose 100 pounds in a year or have you lose 30 pounds in a month, then yes, of course, that diet is going to fail. But just because these crash diets and think about it, these crash diets have been the thing that have been popular for so long, year after year after year. It hasn't been until recently where more and more people are talking about, finding a sustainable way to lose weight, talking about your TDEE, talking about this is how to lose weight in a sustainable way instead of this is how you can lose 20 pounds in a week, right? That hasn't been talked about for a very long time. So of course there aren't many studies that are talking about those things. And so what's more important than the fact that a lot of diets fail instead is why are those diets failing, right? Okay, let's keep going.
Studies across the board show that 95% of people who pursue weight loss will gain back all the weight they lost within 5 years of their diet beginning. And that's regardless of whether or not they continue their behaviors. And 2/3 of those people will gain back more weight than they lost.
Okay, remember that statistic she just used. 95% of diets fail. Remember that because I have a study that I'm going to show you guys, or I have an article that I'm going to show you guys.
This is another study saying the same thing. Here's another study saying the same thing. And the weight loss that is experienced by that tiny percentage for the long term is like 5 or 10 pounds. I could drop 5 pounds right now with a loofah and a haircut.
No, you couldn't. Unless you're saying you haven't showered in like 4 months or something like that, then I guess that's kind of gross, but whatever. All right, so that's the end of that one. Okay, so remember, 95%, right? So 95%, that's the number we always hear. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go into my Discord and Sophie, thank you so much, into the Discord, she sent me this link. Okay, so like I said, remember the 95%, right? So that's the number you always hear when people talk about how all diets fail. And so this is from the New York Times. Now, what's crazy about this? What's crazy about this article came out in 1999, okay? So this is a very, very old article. It's like 20 years old, right? Yeah, 20 years old pretty much now. May 25th, 1999. So this information has been out there for a long time, okay? And so we're just going to read through this article. It is a depressing article of faith among the overweight and those who treat them that 95% of people who lose weight regain it and sometimes more. That's exactly what the lady just said, right, in the earlier video. Within a few months or years. That statistic has been quoted widely over the last 4 decades in congressional hearings, diet books, research papers, and seminars, and it is the reason so many people approach dieting with a sense of hopelessness, of course. But in fact, obesity researchers say no one has any idea how many people can lose weight and keep it off. Now, as researchers try to determine how many people have succeeded, they are also studying the success stories for lessons that might inspire others to try. Okay, quote, that 95% figure has become clinical lore, says Dr. Thomas Wadden, a professor of psychiatry at the University of Pennsylvania. There is no basis for it, he said, but it's part of the mythology of obesity. Dr. Kelly D. Brownell, the director of the Yale Center for Eating and Weight Disorders, said that the number was first suggested in a 1959 clinical study of only 100 people, okay? Only 100 people. Only 100 people. Important. That's a very small study. That's not a very big study. The finding was repeated so often that it came to be regarded as fact, he said. Since then, nearly all studies of weight loss, recidivism, I don't know that word at all, have followed patients in formal, hospital or university programs because they are the easiest to identify and keep track of. But people who turn to such programs may also be the most difficult cases and may therefore have especially poor success rates. That is so important. Like, think about it. The people that are going to these studies and that are going to get professional help at a hospital or at these universities are probably people that have tried and failed and failed and failed. So these are the people that are trying to get help from these people, right? And so it is normal, of course, like they would probably have their success rate is going to be lower because they have probably tried so many times and now they are going to, doctor's offices and trying to get help, right? Okay. So to get a more accurate picture, 2 researchers are studying long-term dieters for a project called the National Weight Control Registry. I've heard about this before. And have found it surprisingly easy to collect success stories. About half of the people who maintained a substantial weight loss for more than a year have done it on their own, they found. This suggests that people have found ways to lose weight and keep it off, but have never been counted in formal studies. Okay, that's important, right? Because all of these, everyone says 95%, but there's a lot of people, myself included, I'm not in some formal study that they could use my number and say, okay, well, this guy lost the weight and kept it off, right? So that is incredibly important. Okay, let's keep going. There is something very optimistic about this whole data set, said Dr. Rena Wing, a professor of psychiatry at the University of Pittsburgh and the Brown University School of Medicine. Without much effort, we have identified 2,500 people who have succeeded. Dr. Wing and Dr. James O'Hill of the University of Colorado are collaborating on the registry project, which they began 5 years ago with financing from drug companies and other sources. They are compiling detailed histories of successful long-term dieters, people who had maintained a weight loss of at least 30 pounds for at least 1 year. Most of the volunteers were solicited through articles in newspapers and magazines, and as we can tell, this was definitely from the 90s, okay? It was really to convince ourselves and to convince the world that there are people who are successful and then to learn from them, Dr. Wing said. To their surprise, Dr. Wing and Dr. Hill found that on average, the respondents had maintained a 67-pound weight loss for 5 years. Between 12 and 14% had maintained a weight loss of more than 100 pounds. So obviously, this is so different from the number that we always hear, 95%. And I've literally even had it. I've even heard like 99%, like people basically saying it's literally impossible. So again, just because there might be a study about something, that doesn't mean that is 100% fact. Especially the study that she mentioned was from so long ago. And the study that she mentioned literally wasn't even about weight loss. Like, come on, man. Okay, let's keep going. The success stories might not have been so surprising had it been clear that the 95% failure rate was so poorly founded. The figure comes not from any kind of random sampling, but from a study of 100 patients treated for obesity at a nutrition clinic at New York Hospital in the 1950s, right? The 1950s, this is the numbers that people are using. The 95% comes from this study in 1950 of 100 people. Like, come on, man. All right, let's keep going. In 1959, its authors, Dr. Albert Stunkard and Mavis McLaren Hume, published a paper in which they concluded most obese persons will not stay in treatment, most will not lose weight, and those who do lose weight, most will regain it. That conclusion, Dr. Brownell of Yale said, has since become the most frequently quoted statement in obesity literature. Yes, it definitely has been. Dr. Skunkard, Dr. Skunkard is someone that was part of the original study. Okay, it's important to see that, right? So Albert Skunkard was part of the original study in the 50s, okay? So Dr. Skunkard, who is now a professor of psychiatry at the University of Pennsylvania, said the study was perfectly respectable for that period, okay, for that period. The paper made a big impact because everyone thought obesity was pretty easy to treat, he said. It's definitely not. This showed that for whatever reason, it wasn't, which I agree, it definitely isn't. but the study has little relevance to the current understanding of how to control weight, said Dr. Stunkard, who specializes in the treatment of obesity and eating disorders. The 100 patients in the study were just given a diet and sent on their way, he said. That was state of the art in 1959, he added. I've been sort of surprised that people keep citing it. I know we do better these days. Again, this is someone that was part of the original study that everyone always mentions when they say it is impossible to lose weight. Okay? One of the person that made the study is now saying, I don't know why people keep on bringing it up. It doesn't make any sense to me. That's incredibly important, okay? All right. The intervening years have brought significant changes to the treatment of obesity. The most important of which, Dr. Skunkard says, has been the introduction of behavior modification techniques. Okay, so not just telling people, go on keto, see you in a year, let's see how you do, right? Changing the behaviors, which is what I always talk about, right? Okay. Since the 1959 study, though, the statistic has been reinforced by most other clinical studies, which have showed people with discouraging results. Unless we can prove they're typical, the data cannot be generalized, Dr. Brownell said. The people we see in these clinics tend to be more overweight and have more psychological problems. They are more likely by a factor of 2 to have binge eating problems, which of course is going to make losing weight much more difficult. The true failure rate could be much better or much worse, he said, but the fact is we just don't know. The new research on successful dieters will disappoint those hoping for a magic bullet solution. Most had simply eaten less and healthier food and exercised regularly, but judging by their accounts, it is entirely possible for people without the resources to hire personal trainers and chefs to accomplish permanent weight loss. That's exactly what I did, right? For inspiration, it would be difficult to surpass the story of one of the participants in the weight control registry, Tammy Munson, a 32-year-old receptionist and ambulance dispatcher from Jamestown, New York, who lost 147 pounds and has kept it off for 8 years. And then they kind of just go over her story. And that's pretty much it. So, again, the thing that is frustrating is that the study that she mentioned in her video, you know, the big gotcha moment, wasn't even a study that was about weight loss, right? The study that she talks about, the 8-year study that she talks about. But then she talks about the 95% number, which we've all heard so many times. And the fact is, 1, that was from the 50s, and 2, the person that literally did the study, the doctor that was there, doesn't even understand why people keep bringing it up because they don't think that it's even worth it. And so that's why it's so frustrating. Like I've always said, like you can literally find a study that will agree or disagree with any point that you make at any point in your life. Like you can find a study that says apples are bad for you, and if you eat them, you'll die. And then you can find another study that says apples are good for you. You should eat them every day. Like you will always be able to find a study that will agree or disagree with whatever point you want to make if you look hard enough. I truly believe that. But I do think it's important. So now you guys that are watching this video, hopefully, I'll make sure I'll link this article that we talked about. Hopefully you guys will have a little bit of knowledge on your side now. So when people say, oh, it's impossible to lose weight, 95% of people, blah, blah, blah. You can be like, first off, that's from the freaking 50s. Second off, the person that did that study doesn't even agree with him anymore. And third off, you're a dummy. But yeah, that's my spiel on that little video there.
Obey the warning signs, and when there are flashing lights or wigwags, don't attempt to cross until they come to a complete stop.